and welcome to the international programme. Well, the 23rd of April is World Book Day, and we're celebrating this month with a visit to an American author who's made her home here in Herzegovina. A Dragon Bird in the Fern is a novel for young adults by local author Laura Rueckert. Set in the aftermath of an assassination, the opening chapters address political marriage, moving to a foreign land, and the challenge of living with a new language. I asked Laura if her lead character, a particularly brave young woman, was inspired by anyone she knew.
So I would say there's a lot of elements of different people in it. So on the one hand, I myself moved from the US to Germany. Not that I see myself as this strong person. It was kind of a thing that just happened and I just went with it. So I didn't see myself as especially brave. Mm-hmm. But I did have the experience of learning a new language and learning a culture and making either assumptions or mistakes or things like that come with moving. Then I have some family members who have dyslexia. And Jara has dyslexia, although it's never stated in the book because that's like a diagnosis, and they don't have that in this fantasy world. So her parents just kind of think maybe she's flighty or not so interested in her studies and things like that. But really, it's dyslexia. Mm-hmm. So there's that. And then beyond that, it's kind of just made up. There's a murderer. There's a ghost who is actually turning more and more dangerous as time goes by. Those are dangerous. But then there are things that I think anybody can relate to, like trying to see, do I trust myself? Do I believe in myself and things like that. So that's kind of the part that I hope that people can relate to, and the rest is just the adventure part. I just wanted to have someone who really wanted to help her family, support her family, and especially to do the right thing for her country. One thing I did want to mention about the dyslexia in it is there are just so many different forms of dyslexia. Mm-hmm. So if anyone does read this and has dyslexia and says, that's not what it's like for me, then I'm sure that's true, because it's like this for some people, not for others. I actually had some authors who have dyslexia read it ahead of time to give me pointers on some things to change. But even then, you can't cover everything. It's not a monolith, basically.
Good point. It's a fantasy land that the setting is in this book. Were you inspired by anywhere in particular?
I kind of thought of Jara's country as Venice, but if it was tropical. So I kind of tried to mix the canals with, maybe some tropical fruits and things like that, and really hot climate. And then the country that she moves to, so where the king that she ends up marrying is kind of a mixture of Sweden and New Zealand. So just kind of a real mashup there of the countries. And so I try to do that partly in terms of architecture, in terms of the climate, in terms of the languages, but also twisted everything. So there's not like real Italian or real Swedish or anything. It's just kind of mixed up languages that might have kind of a feeling that they belong to that language tree, maybe.
Some authors might sit in a cafe, look at people, take characteristics from people. Is that something you practice?
Sometimes I do think of a certain thing someone does, maybe the way they hold their hands, or I don't know, certain actions possibly, or the way they talk, or even something like, that hairstyle or something like that, and I'll use that. But I would probably say that's one of my weak points is really watching people and describing people. Usually when I start writing, and I write maybe even a rough draft, it's like everything except for descriptions of the people, and then I have to force myself later to say, okay, she'll have brown hair and he will be this tall or something, but that all comes later because I don't even consider those kind of things usually in the first run through.
You've got a family here, 2 children of your own. You're busy during the day. Where do you go and write? Where, if you have a secret hole that you go and write in?
So when my kids were younger and I had to drive them places, then I would take my laptop with me, and then they would do soccer practice, and I would, sit on the sidelines and type or something like that. Now that they're older and they don't need me to do that so much, usually I try to write in the afternoons or on weekends. A lot of authors like to write, until well into the night, and I just get tired. So for me, I'm better in the morning or the afternoon, and I just have to see where I can squeeze it in.
Okay. And you prefer a laptop? You don't use a pen and paper?
I actually love both, but for different things. So I love writing with a pen and paper when it's notes and when I kind of think with a pen. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to actually drafting or revising, then I usually use the laptop now. Okay. I just am way faster with typing.
A Dragonberg in the Fern is your first published book. What other styles of writing have you done in the past?
The very first book I wrote was actually for adults, and I wasn't really happy with it. I felt like it felt too young, and that's basically how I got into writing the young adult literature, because I was trying to think of how to make it seem older, and then I realized, well, wait, maybe that's just my natural voice is just younger. I just recently wrote a novel in verse, basically. I don't know if it's any good yet. It's very new. I'm very, fresh. Definitely, I've always loved ghost stories and space stories and aliens and things like that. I think my mother was into science fiction, so I remember watching like the old original Star Trek with her. And I think that just kind of pulled me in, and it was always just something I thought was so cool and so many possibilities and so creative.
Your dedication inside your book is to your mum. Mm-hmm. She's encouraged you with your writing over the years?
Yes, so I've probably wanted to be a writer since I was like 10, something like that. Also throughout high school, I used to write a lot of short stories and things like that. And my mother would always say, oh, someday you're going to publish a book. Someday you'll have a book. And then I went to college and I realized how hard it is to be a writer and how uncertain it is that you can ever earn enough money to support yourself. And I concentrated instead on a career that would give me enough money to live on. I concentrated on my family. And then one day I decided, oh, I think I want to start writing again. But before that, my mother never gave up. She kept telling me, someday you're going to publish a book. And I was like, I haven't written in years. There's no way I'm going to publish a book. And so, I mean, looking back now, I'm kind of baffled that she never lost the faith that I would, and she was right. And so moms are amazing.
Well done, Mom. And is Laura's award-winning book part of a series?
So right now there's only one book planned. I honestly did have an idea for a companion book. So it wouldn't be really a series following the same characters. I would take one of the side characters and have a completely new story. But I don't have a publisher for it right now. So I would say it's not planned, but never say never.
Getting a publisher is a huge challenge for writers. I asked Laura how she went about finding hers.
I was able to get kind of into a children's literature community online, and so that's how I kind of learned which are the publishers that are more reputable, which are ones that I could submit to myself without an agent, or which ones with an agent. So that's how I found one. But it was definitely, it's hard, and even authors who have published books before, there's no guarantee that their next book will be published. I know of one author, she's written 7 books since her debut book, and it was the 8th that finally sold again. So it happens to a lot more people than you'd realize. Even popular authors have books that they have in their drawer somewhere saying, someday maybe I can bring this back.
And the cover image is beautiful. You must have been delighted with that.
I was. It was a really fun process for me to see how that went. And I know every publisher is different. A lot of publishers, the author has absolutely no say in it. And I remember talking to one who even was so upset about his cover not fitting the book that he added a dream sequence in just to try to make something that looked like the cover. But for mine, I was able to give input about different things that I could imagine, and then they sent me 3 possible covers, and 2 of them I loved. I had such a hard time even saying which one was my favorite. So I know there's like this secret other cover that could have been out there in the world too, but I thought this one was a little bit more eye-catching. And then there was a third one that I really, really hated and just, crossed my fingers, please don't take this cover. And they didn't, so they chose my number 1. I just like how it looks like it's kind of exploding, and I think of Jara as bursting out of her shell, kind of, so I think it fits really nicely.
And at the moment, your book is in English. Is there a chance that it'll be translated into other languages, German?
So I would love that. I would really love it. A lot of people have asked me, why don't I just translate it and publish it? I think that's where I would say I am fluent maybe with German, but there's a really big difference between conversational fluency and being able to write beautiful prose. So I know I don't have the skills in German to do that. All publishing contracts are different, and the way my publishing contract is, my publisher actually owns the rights for foreign languages, meaning that they can sell to a German publisher, and then the German publisher could have it translated. So if anyone has a German publisher that would love to have this in German, let me know and I will hook you up with my publisher. But so far, it's not planned.
Keep our fingers crossed for you that somebody's listening.
Oh, yes, please.
But we can still buy your book here. It's available in Amazon. Is it also in the local bookstores?
I don't know if Bücher Medien und Mehr, for example, in Herzogenaurach has any copies right now. They have had some before, but they can definitely order it. That's absolutely no problem, and they're happy to order. So in general, basically any bookstore in Germany or worldwide, you can order it if it's not already there in the store. And I actually encourage that, supporting independent bookstores, and even if it's a chain, basically anything that's not Amazon, just because they have such a monopoly. So it's great to support any of their competition.
Before we left, I couldn't resist asking Laura to read us a little from her book. First, she sets the scene.
The king of this other country and Jara were with Jara's mother, the queen, and all the advisors on her side, and then the king's advisors discussing their engagement and whether they would get married. And suddenly, basically, the king asks Jara to leave the room and walk outside with him for a moment. And we have to remember, they don't speak the same language. So, when we were far out of hearing of the palace on the edge of a grove of shade trees, he held up an open palm. Guards from the king's and mother's armies hovered protectively around the edges of a wide imaginary circle, as if a glass globe had been dropped over us. The king garbled a few sentences at me, then smiled in a way that granted his eyes a warm glow and drew out my own smile, as if he wasn't a king and I wasn't a princess, as if we'd met in town at the market while buying fresh fruit, and he'd asked me to escape the humidity of the city on a boat ride with him, or to sit under a tree to snack on some pineapple. Rafar lowered himself to the damp grass under a shady queensflower tree, gesturing to the spot next to him. My silk scintilla dress would get wet, but it would also cool me in this afternoon's oppressive heat. I settled next to the king while he wrote on the slate. Then, word for word, he looked them up in his book, writing each letter slowly and carefully. Finally, he passed the slate to me. I followed the Azarian words with my finger. It was hard enough for me to concentrate on written words anyway, but with the king breathing down my neck, it was almost impossible. Words jumped off the slate, and I squinted, pulling them back. I forced the letters of each word to swim into the right order. One or two words made no sense at all, but I wasn't with a tutor, looking to master a text, or to get a good grade to impress mother. I only needed to understand the gist, and that I did. Are you certain you want to marry me, or is the queen forcing you? Be truthful. I will not betray your trust. Dragonbird in the fern.
Lovely to hear it in your voice. You've got a lovely lilt speaking. It looks lovely. It's nice to see it professionally published, isn't it?
Yeah.
What an exciting moment for you. Well, this copy was bought here, but you can also get a copy from Herzogenaurach's library. Thank you for watching. We look forward to seeing you next time. Goodbye.